Hello, firefighters. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Harold, my good friend, thank you for that overly generous introduction, that old joke. If my mother were here, she'd wonder who you were talking about. My father would say, that's my son. But thank you very much. And it's a great honor, and I mean it sincerely, ladies and gentlemen, to be invited to speak with you this morning. It's always, it's like coming home. Quite frankly, my fire service in my state of Delaware has been the source of my support from the very beginning, and I've appreciated it. And I hope I've earned it. Way back in 1972, those of you from Delaware may remember, although you're not active anymore if you were back there in '72. That we have a thing in Delaware where the fire service is really both the your organization, labor, as well as the volunteer fire services throughout the state have a very they're very unified, and they work very closely together. In a little state like mine, the fire hall is where you get married, where the service is held afterwards, where baptisms are held. Well, not baptisms, but birthdays and the like. It's sort of the ultimate social club, and it's the country club for the guys and the women I was raised with. And there's always an event they have at a different fire hall at the beginning of every campaign, or actually in late September. And I was a 29-year-old kid running for the United States Senate, and I appeared before a crowd about the size of this crowd in a place called the Milk Creek Fire Hall on the Kirkwood Highway. And I was running against a really fine fella. His name was J. Caleb Boggs, who had historically gotten support from the fire service. And I stood up, and it was a little bit, it was like, who's this kid coming along here? I had built some credibility because I'd been a local councilman and been very supportive of the fire services as a councilman. And I stood up, and I wasn't making much headway. And I looked out and I said, look, and this has become a famous phrase in Delaware from politicians from that point on. I said, there's three political parties in Delaware. There's Democrats, Republicans, and firefighters. If I get to choose only one, I want the firefighters. And I got the firefighters. Not a joke. Not a joke. And thank God they chose me. And but I've been indebted to you for more than all these years of support you provided for me politically and personally. As Harold said, I'm personally indebted. My family is. The fire service saved my boys' lives when they were in a terrible accident involving the loss of their mother and their sister. And it was the fire service that rushed me to Walter Reed, what turned out to be a 13-hour operation in the middle of a snowstorm because I had a cranial aneurysm, and saved my life. And it was the fire service not too many years later that saved my home when it was struck by lightning, and all three floors, including the attic, were engulfed with the thickest smoke you can imagine. But the thing I remember most about that is getting my wife out of the house and saving 2/3 of my house. I was able to be rebuilt. The most poignant scene was as the fire service was outside, it was raining, and my wife, it was early in the morning, and was out, and I was away, and she was out in a bathrobe, and one of my friends took a photograph of one of the firemen taking off their jacket and put it on my wife's shoulders. That's sort of the way you guys have embraced me my whole career. And you're a rare breed. You know that old saying, you've heard of it many times. All men are created equal. Then a few become firefighters. And you have been that way to me and my family, and I would argue to this country. You're the most important and oftentimes the most underappreciated group of women and men in all of America. During the course of a single year, a firefighter has a 40% greater chance of being injured. It's a more dangerous job than mining, constructing, logging. It's up there with law enforcement. You take extraordinary risks to perform acts of extreme valor, but you always say the same thing when I show up, no matter where it is in the country, to honor those who have fallen and those who have made great sacrifices. When I walk up, and Harold's been with me, I've been with Harold many times, and I say thank you. And the same expression comes no matter whether I'm out in Arizona or I'm in New York City. I'm just doing my job, sir. I'm just doing my job. Maybe that's why people don't think of you until they need you. But I know you. I know who you are. I grew up with you in Claymont, in Scranton. You're the ones who are always the guy that steps up at the time when the kid's being bullied in high school. You're the ones who take off your gear after responding to an alarm and go out to the Little League field and line the field. You're the ones who take trucks out of the fire hall and set up the tables for a potluck dinner to raise money for a person's home you couldn't save, who lost everything, lost their clothing. You're a remarkable bunch. I mean, I really mean this. You're a remarkable bunch. You're the ones who have been plowing and shoveling on your time off all winter long for your neighbors, your churches, your schools. You represent the heart, the soul. You're the very sinew and spine of the cities and towns and counties you all come from. You are the definition, and I mean this sincerely, you are the definition of civic responsibility. It's not just your professional side. It's how you conduct yourselves. And the amazing thing is that you practice that citizenship without ever thinking much about it. And you do it every day. And, look, I know there's bad apples in every organization. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture that everything's perfect. But you are the most extraordinary group of women and men that I have ever worked with. And for that, we owe you not only our appreciation, we owe you our support. At a minimum, we owe you the training, the equipment, the personnel you need to get the job done so you can return home safely at the end of the day, because you're returning home in the same neighborhoods you're protecting. That's what I've fought for my entire career. That's why I joined years ago with my good friend Chris Dodd, and we passed the SAFER Act back in 2003 to help recruit and hire more firefighters, because all of you know the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health confirmed that in case after case, quote, insufficient manpower is the key contributing factor to firefighters' deaths. You know the correlation. The public doesn't fully understand it. That's why we fought tooth and nail to increase funding for the SAFER grants. Ever since the president and I took office, providing $2 billion, 1,426 grants to support over 9,000 jobs. That's why we increased the flexibility of those grants so that they can be used to prevent layoffs and rehire firefighters during times of fiscal strain instead of exclusively recruiting new firefighters. That was part of the Recovery Act, as Harold mentioned. Provided $210 million to help 120 fire departments modernize and build new stations. You know, it's amazing. The opposition looks at this and somehow there's a recession. So the way to deal with the recession is, let's cut firefighters. Let's cut the very element of what the community needs more than any other single piece. They did the same with law enforcement as well. And we've insisted that 20% of this goes to volunteer fire service as well, because they're not organized as well as you are all across America. It's also clear after the events of 9/11 that when disaster strikes, the last thing we can afford is our first responders being unable to communicate with one another. It's hard for people to believe. Fortunately, your successors are going to go back and say, you mean to tell me in the middle of that debacle, in the middle of Katrina, in the middle of these other things, you weren't actually able to communicate to one another? I mean, when you look back on it and imagine how hard Harold and I, all of you, fought to change that. Why was even a fight? That's why we fought, though, over the decade to set aside wireless spectrum for first responders. That's why you have D-Block now. That's why, as Vice President, one of my proudest achievements was during the fiscal cliff negotiations when we were able to protect the funding to set up a truly interoperable communications network. That was one of the things being negotiated. Remember, Howard, when I was doing that negotiation? They did not want to fund that piece. In the name of what? In the name of economic austerity? But that was the fight. It was a fight. And if the president had not authorized me to say, unless this is in the deal, there's no deal, there wouldn't have been a deal. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I believe we have an obligation to equip and support you when we send you into harm's way. Just as surely as we have an obligation to equip and support troops we send overseas. And I take that obligation deadly seriously. And I've tried to live by it my entire career. And that's also why I make no apology for a lifetime spent fighting for your right to collectively bargain. I use you as an example in every community I go into when I get questions about collective bargaining in unions. Where would the community be without their physical safety, without your ability to collectively bargain? And quite frankly, I have a bad reputation of saying what's on my mind. Quite frankly, I have sometimes maybe not been as, how can I say it, diplomatic in my choice of comments about those who've gone after you. I resent the attacks on you by those, particularly in the other outfit, that see you as an obstacle to overcome, a drag on the community instead of the heart and soul and essence of the community. You are the community. And it's a remarkable worldview some of these folks have, which makes no distinction for the right of first responders to ask for safety equipment so they don't get hurt, disability coverage if God forbid they do, and a full crew so they won't get killed with lack of a backup. That's your right to ask for. We should all be asking for that. And this argument that you don't have the right to do that, that you can't use your collective bargaining and capability to insist on that, it's not the country that I know. It's not the country that Democrats and Republicans historically have supported. It didn't used to be that way. It didn't used to be that way. That wasn't how we always dealt with things. This used to be a bipartisan thing. Back in 2000, when I teamed up with Chris Dodd and Susan Collins, a Republican from Maine, in the Fire Act, there were many Republicans in both chambers who lined up as co-sponsors. They were supportive. They understood the value you provide to each of your communities. But something's changed. This is not your father's Republican Party. When it came time to strengthen those same programs to purchase equipment and modernize Firehouse in the Recovery Act, nearly every one of the other team voted no. And every single year, almost every one of the House of Representatives has voted for the Ryan budget, which would cut the SAFER Act, which cut the Fire Act, which grants over $100 million a year. Look at how the vast majority of the other team voted in funding the Department of Homeland Security. Even though the Speaker tried to get it passed, he couldn't get his own members. Can you imagine that happening 10 years ago or 15 years ago? They're willing to sacrifice your needs on the altar of ideology. Shutter the fire academy. Stop payments for the Safer and Fire Act grants. Send federal firefighters and other first responders out into harm's way without pay. They didn't think it was a big deal. Congressman Brooks, who I really don't know, of Alabama, said, and I quote, "There was hardly any effect whatsoever on the Department of Homeland Security from the last shutdown." Whoa. And Congressman King of Iowa said, "Look at the price that was paid for a constitution and the rule of law. Can you explain to the people that are in their graves in Arlington that we don't want to delay paychecks?" I think he can explain it pretty clearly. You know, it's a lot easier for him to say you don't have to worry about losing a paycheck for a month or two than it is for him to say that. How many people do you know in the middle class that can afford to go a month or two without a paycheck, without having to decide whether to be later in their mortgage payment or their gas bill or their car payment? That's where most Americans live. That's where most Americans I grew up with live. That's the normal circumstance for the vast majority of us. And what bothers me most about this new outfit is the cavalier way in which they talk about other people's lives. It's part of a stunning pattern of disregard for the role you play in your communities. They act like you're the community's problem, as if you caused the recession instead of the irresponsible behavior on Wall Street and the banks. Remember those fights we were having in the Recovery Act? You were the problem. Republican governors and others around the country are saying, you're the problem. They act as if somehow you come from some other place, as if you're not trying to make it work for your middle-class communities that you come from. How many of you had a spouse who lost their job or got their hours cut? How many of you had to step in and help your elderly parents with basic needs? How many of you have gone to bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering whether you're going to be able to be in the same house a month or two from that time? How many of you have had to tell your kids, honey, I'm sorry, no camp, no vacation this year, can't do the same things we did? It's not the end of the world, but let me tell you, it feels like it when you're doing it. You live in the neighborhoods of those whose property and lives you swore to protect and help save. You are the community. You make it possible for people to live basic middle-class lives. You know, there's a chart that I use. I'm about to make a speech at the Brookings Institution on the economy. There's a direct correlation. As union power has declined, the middle class has declined almost in the same exact trajectory. Labor built the middle class. Labor is the reason there is a middle class. Ask those guys who have a different view than us, when someone is trapped in a second-story burning building, who's the guy or woman that runs in and saves that neighbor, your neighbor? It's you. When there's a car accident, the husband makes that frantic 911 call and says, my wife is trapped. She's trapped in a vehicle. I can't get her out. Who do they send? Who shows up with the jaws of life, pulls her out, and then rides in the ambulance holding her hand, telling her it's going to be okay, we'll get you there. It's going to be okay. That's who you are. Cut through all the malarkey. That's who you are. I understand you're going to hear from a bunch of candidates tomorrow. Well, ask them. Ask them whether they think you're a drag on the community, whether you're an obstacle to overcome. or whether you are the community. And in order for you to be able to protect the community, there are certain basic things you need. Make a judgment. Make a judgment. Do they understand you? Do they get who you are? Do they get what this is about? Ask if they understand your families. The ones who know what can happen every time you pull on those boots and walk out the door, but they still send you on your way. Ask them if they get that. Ask them if they understand what it means. Every time your wife, your husband, your child, there's that alarm go off if you live anywhere near the neighborhood, or turns on the television and sees a 6 alarm and wonders, where are you? Where are you at this moment? Where's my husband? Where's my wife? Where's my brother? We owe them as well. We owe them the certainty that you have everything you need. The poet John Milton said, they also serve who only stand and wait. And so many of your family members know the danger because you've been through it before, time and again, and they stand and wait. See if these guys get what this is all about. Because we've got to change the dismissive contempt that has taken hold in this new outfit. We've got to get back to basic values that we all once shared. Because it's not just you. I said back in 2008 when I spoke to you, and it's even more true today, war has been declared on labor's house. When I said it, I think some thought I was exaggerating. There is a concentrated, well-organized, well-paid, well-funded effort to undermine organized labor in the United States of America. And they've been remarkably successful because you, labor writ large, are the only thing that stands between the people's interest and special interest owning it all. Because they know without you, it's a clear shot for whatever they want. That's why they're so intent on breaking unions, on diminishing your voice, on resisting our attempts to, under the NLRB, to enforce the basic rules of the road. They're not looking for striped shirts, guys. They're looking for black shirts, not referees. You represent more than firefighters. You represent the middle-class communities that you helped build, the machinists who live next door to you, the elderly woman across the street who worked her whole life as a teacher and now is trying to figure out how to get by, the kid around the corner who's training to become a software engineer. That's who you represent. Let me explain to you what I mean by middle class. It is not a number. The economists will give you numbers. My economist will tell me it's $51,300 or $52,000. It's not that. It's a value set. It's a value set. It's about being able to own your own home and not just rent it. It's about being able to send your kid to a park where you know they can go and play and come home safely. It's about being able to send your kid to a local school. You know, if they do well, they'll be able to get to college. And if they get to college and they want to go, you'll be able to figure out somehow how to get them there. In the meantime, you're able to take care of your mom or dad after the other one passes away. And hope and pray that you've been able to put enough away through a pension that you're not going to have to be taken care of by your children. What I'm hearing a lot of, and you're hearing too, a lot of experts today are saying that we can't claim that dream anymore, that the world has changed. They say the middle class is resetting their expectations about what's possible. Maybe they can't own their own home anymore. Maybe renting is better. Maybe they can't put their kid through school after high school, whether it's 2 years or 4 years. Maybe they can't retire like they thought they were going to be. Maybe they have to accommodate that change. I don't buy it. Where is it written? Where is it written that that middle class dream cannot continue to be an achievable goal for any American who's willing to work hard to achieve it? Where is that written? Ladies and gentlemen, this canon must be fixed. This canon must be fixed. I believe the middle class today still has the same hopes, still has the same dreams we had growing up. And I believe it's totally within our wheelhouse to be able to provide those opportunities. We've got to change some basic policies, but I won't take time to go into with you now. We need to be able to give our folks a fighting chance, just an opportunity. That's it. That's it. Because the history of the journey of this nation has been, two things are absolutely clear. Whenever given a fighting chance, the American people have never, ever, 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 ever let their country down. And the second truism is, whenever that alarm is sounded, no matter what you're doing, no matter how you feel, no matter where you are, no matter angry you may be about your circumstance, you're always there. You always respond. And we have an obligation to always respond to your needs as well. God bless firefighters everywhere. And may God protect our troops. God bless you all for who you are. Thank you.